Our next presenter is Rhonda Rudnitski. Following Rhonda's presentation, I have a very exciting announcement about a special presenter that we have coming in this afternoon. But first, Rhonda Rudnitski. Rhonda is the Executive Director of Environment, Health and Safety for Nualta's operations and has been working there since 2004. Rhonda has 21 years of experience in the waste management industry and earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering from the University of Alberta. She has completed the Occupational Health and Safety Certificate Program from Ryerson University and several graduate-level courses in environmental engineering at the University of Alberta. Rhonda is here to speak with us about how to build your brand as an emerging leader. She's an expert in this area with a proven ability to attract high-profile projects. Over the course of her career, Rhonda has solidified her reputation as a leader and is here to share some key steps in improving brand recognition. Please join me in welcoming Rhonda to the podium. Just to the right.
To the right is good. All right. Thank you. I'm honored and excited to be here with you today. I have to admit, though, I just got back from a holiday in Italy, and I was hoping that I would come here looking refreshed, feeling great, and having that Tuscan glow. Unfortunately, I came back with pneumonia and a double ear infection, so enjoy me for what I am. And one of the things I think to take away from this is just deal with the cards that you get, because somehow, at the end of the day, it all works out. I've been blessed with what, for me, has been a satisfying career. If I could have seen this far into the future on my convocation day, I actually would have been astounded. In my world, I'm successful, but in the scheme of the world, I'm actually pale and insignificant. I'm not Bill Gates, and I'm certainly not Mother Teresa, and I never will be. The reason I mention this to you is because in order for you to believe in your personal brand and to own it, you need to understand where the boundaries of your world are and define your own success from there. It's very much a personal and individual thing. Unlike formulas and theorems, there's no generic path or endpoint. The key to remember is that everyone and everything matters. To be your own successful self, it is important to do what is meaningful for you, have passion for what is yours, and to do your thing well. Know your boundaries and accept, but never be afraid to stretch them or expand your horizons. My early career path was littered with lack of direction and the bottom of the barrel opportunities. But 20 years later, I can honestly say that those barrel bottoms have made me well-rounded and positioned me to advance. That said, I hope I can inspire you to shift your boundaries, stretch your limits, and reach your personal goals. Turn ordinary into your very own extraordinary. All right, so I'm just going to go through a little bit of a session roadmap so that you know what we're up against for the next hour or so. I'm going to talk about what branding is. I'm going to talk about building your brand. I'm going to talk about how to solidify your reputation. I'll go through the difference between leader and technical expert, how to attract high-profile projects, and kind of throughout the whole discussion, I'll throw in my brand and my journey, and hopefully it'll help you understand things better. Oh, technical glitch. There we go. So throughout our time together, I'll share points about my personal brand with you. One of the most recognizable elements of my brand is personal strength and perseverance. Everyone knows my brand knows that and recognizes it. If there's an insurmountable challenge in our organization, I'm typically tasked with leading that project and getting us through it. And the reason is it's my tenacity and perseverance and hard work that'll get our organization there. And if it's a failure, my organization will accept the fact that I tried as hard as I could and that no stone was left unturned and that the failure needs to be accepted. Some elements of your personal brand are going to change or evolve over time, and others will remain constant because they are who you are inside and outside of work. Inner strength and perseverance are buried deep within my core. I attribute this to the day that I was born and my start in life. I am a survivor. I was born in the 1960s when there was little chance of survival for premature birth. Premature babies typically had a very small chance for survival, and if they did survive, they either had medical and/or developmental problems. On January 7th, I was born, 6 weeks premature. The night that I was born, the doctors told my parents I would not make it through the night. At the end of March, they actually took me home from the hospital, and thankfully here I am today with not a thing wrong with me. But I do believe that that is the core of my soul. And throughout my talk, you'll see how that kind of has influenced me and who I am. So I want to talk a little bit about branding now. I've chosen a definition from Me Inc. to define branding. Branding is a name to which a set of associations and benefits has become attached in the customer's mind. Some brands are strong and universally recognizable. Any doubt what this scooter is delivering through the streets of Cairo? I guess not. Everybody knows what McDonald's is, and no matter where you are in the world, McDonald's brand and menu is recognizable. Although this can is written in Arabic, I bet you know the product inside is Diet Coke. And when you open it, I know that you know what the taste will be like and what your expectation is. Those are global brands, and they're recognized throughout the world. In your own world, you want your brand to be exactly the same: strong, consistent, and recognizable. All right, personal brand. So like your corporate brand, your personal brand really defines you. It's what others think of you. To be successful, it needs to be strong, solid, and recognizable. Let's look at some examples of people who have personal brands. I'll start with Marissa Mayer. She was the first female engineer at Google. She was also their 20th employee, and she's now the CEO of that organization. She demonstrates female engineering success to the utmost degree. Look at Lady Gaga, very talented, edgy entertainer, but obviously her brand shows and reflects her creativity and her bold edginess. Look at Steve Jobs, dynamic CEO, who's intrinsically linked to his company's brand, and every successful CFO or CEO is linked to their brand. And then we'll look at Justin Bieber, who probably hasn't deliberately built a brand, but his brand has been built, and certainly we recognize the erosion of his brand. Some of these individuals have purposely built their brand. We talk about Lady Gaga and Marissa Mayer. They're very intentional in what they do. Others have not, but their brand exists. Personal branding from a business perspective is relatively new, and it's been happening informally, though, for ages and ages. The benefit of being aware of branding gives us an opportunity to build our brand before someone builds it for us, like Justin Bieber. People unconsciously create associations about you based on your brand, your nature, and your habits. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about internal versus external brand, because they're both important and you need to understand as you develop your career how to balance those. Your external brand is what your work in your professional world sees. Your internal brand is what you are in your personal life. The brands can be the same or they can be different. If they're drastically different, however, though, I caution you that you need to protect your personal brand so that it doesn't negatively impact your professional brand or your external brand accidentally. This is really important in the day and age of social media, because social media is one of those pitfalls where we can sometimes accidentally damage our brand without even realizing it. The most important concept to keep in mind is that your personal values need to be the same for both your internal and your external brand. If they are not, you will not be true to yourself, and it'll be impossible to maintain a strong and consistent brand. You'll constantly be conflicted every time you need to make a decision. So let's look at these photos that I have on the screen. On the left, you see me at a conference. It's the Environmental Services Association of Alberta's REMTech conference. I'll call it ESA for short because I'll reference it throughout my talk. At the time that I was president of that association, we were launching Artworks in Alberta. I led the idea of Artworks from its inception to actually becoming a real and viable thing. And I'm proud to say now that Artworks is in its 8th or 9th year. And for me, it really drew two passions together, my passion for the environment and art. And it linked it to the youth of Alberta, which is very important to me as well. So that photo is me launching Artworks. It's my external brand, professional but composed and also passionate. Obviously, the photo on the right is a little bit different. This is probably closer to my internal brand. I'd be surprised if anyone outside of the people in this room today would ever believe that that was me. It's not something that would fit into my organization, and it's not something that would be tolerated. It is me. I do like to be goofy once in a while, but I certainly know that I need to keep those brands separate and to keep my personal life private. And really, the beauty of this was the hat absolutely matched the color of my shirt. That's what motivated me to do what I was doing. And who would believe me, the person who usually goes on archaeological expeditions or vacations or anthropology studies, to end up at Disneyland as an adult having fun? But it is something I guard against. I would never post that on Facebook or tweet about it because I know it would hurt my professional image now. So it's something just to be aware of because those pitfalls are out there, and sometimes you just don't realize you're walking into the trap until you're in it. So let's talk a little bit about why we brand. So you might be asking yourself, why do we brand? The main reason, like I mentioned, for reference, was Justin Bieber. If you don't build your brand yourself, someone is going to build it for you. I also have a list of other reasons that support the benefits of branding. Before I go through the list, though, I want to take a pause, and I want all of you to think about yourself and areas of your career that you feel you would like to build and how branding may help you to achieve that. All right, so I'm going to start with trust and familiarity. If those around you know you, they're more likely to trust you. And if they know your brand, they'll trust your brand, and they're going to be more willing to give you high-profile projects and confidential work. Familiarity ensures that people know your skill set and your strengths, and they will seek you out when they have opportunities for you that fit. And I go back to McDonald's. One of my passions, personal passions, is to travel the world. And when I get really homesick and down and long in the tooth, the first place I seek out is McDonald's. I would never go there here on any given day, but it gives me that sense of familiarity and home. So that's why it's so important. Second thing I'd like to talk about is workplaces of the future. In the past, a lot of people had a single career at a single organization, and it was a lot easier for them to define their career path and go through what we call the traditional route of progression. Nowadays, people change jobs, they even change industries, and sometimes they even change careers. So it's important to have a brand to overcome the inability to have that traditional career path. There's also changing communication patterns out there in our world. Future trends predict that more people will begin to work remotely, and increasingly more is done over email and the internet as opposed to personal face-to-face connections. I still believe that personal face-to-face connections are really important, and whenever you have an opportunity, I encourage you to do that because I think that it just makes you a stronger, better leader and more rounded individual. But that said, you need to build your brand so that it's out there, so that if you don't have that personal interaction opportunity, you have the ability to communicate who you are and yourself through your brand. Branding also makes you memorable. It differentiates you from others, and it can be as simple as you're a pleasant person to work with and you work well in groups. If I'm seeking members for a project team, that's who I'm going to go after as opposed to the company complainer. So think about those kinds of things. Sometimes it's actually the little things that are more important than the big things. When you feel unrecognized, branding can help you gain recognition. If you're aware of your accomplishments and can concisely communicate them, it helps others recognize them. You need to recognize your accomplishments so that others can recognize them with you. Branding will give you a competitive edge. If you're recognized, it will attract others to you. And if you're in a point in your career where you want to do transition, maybe you're moving from technical expert to leader, or you're changing companies, or you're changing industries, or maybe you've just gone as far as you can go conventionally, branding will help to bump you over that final barrier and get you on to the next level. The best example I can think of is when it's time to transition from becoming that technical matter expert that so many of us in the engineering field start as early in our careers and build on, and then when we want to move on to become leaders. I want to mention now just what branding is not, just because it's important to be aware of it so you don't get caught up in it. Avoid these pitfalls when you're managing your brand. It's also good to be aware of these behaviors because you want to not strongly associate with people who have these behaviors. Branding is not a form of self-promotion, it's not a cover for incompetence, and it's not a vehicle to make you famous. These are not strong brand builders, and most leaders can see through it, and although people who portray these characteristics may have short-term gain, typically they do not have long-term career strength or gain. I often see people early in their careers trying to be someone that they are not, just to try and get ahead a little bit more. It works in the short term, but eventually you're going to be faced with a values conflict, and that may be either difficult for you to manage or it may actually harm your career. If you can't be true to yourself in the workplace, there's probably a cultural misalignment between you and your workplace. Many of the work groups I work with, and most of the waste industry is very male-dominated with what we call real men. They have real men hobbies. They love hunting, they like fishing, they like skidooing and quadding. Guess what I do in my spare time? I go to art galleries, I read books, and I listen to classical music. So clearly, off the clock, I'm not networking with these guys. I could never kill a fly, let alone shoot a deer. But I've managed to be successful in our organization because I've been able to build my brand and establish myself within the organization, and I haven't needed that networking that so many men rely on to be able to be successful. I've gained their respect, and they consider me one of the boys, but they know better than to ever invite me to one of their outdoor outings. All right, I'm going to talk about building your brand a little bit. So, Nitesh Balati, when he was working on his master's degree, his MBA, really spent a lot of time on branding. And he talked about a branding pyramid, and he references it throughout his work. I didn't do the pyramid because I didn't have that kind of technical capability on PowerPoint, but I did show you a pyramid. But my pyramid, where I'm representing Nitesh's, goes from the bottom up, so we'll work from there. I'm real. There's no doubt about it. So the first thing you want to do when you build your brand is you really want to determine who you are. It's the soul-searching part of the exercise, and it's probably the most important part. For this to work, you need to be honest with yourself. Think about what makes you different from others. Look at your technical and/or your leadership skill set, depending on where you are in your career, and identify your personal self. Most importantly, figure out where your personal values fit into that. Identify your strengths and your most noteworthy personality traits. Who are you? Who do you want to be? Developing your brand needs to center around your values and making them relevant and meaningful to others. All right, determine what you do next. So you need to know, what do I do well? What do I do not so well? Keep in mind the most successful people are very passionate about what they do. This is how entrepreneurs drive their success. Determine what your passion is and your greatest areas of professional interest. This will solidify the kind of work you want and need to do. Think about what you already do or can aspire to do that adds remarkable, measurable, and distinctive value. If you have not taken a personality profiling course like Briggs-Meyer or DISC, I strongly suggest that you do. It'll help you to understand who you are, where you are in your life, and what your limitations may be. I actually took one and I was astounded that I was a visionary. And once I was aware of that and I had that self-awareness, I recognized that I was a visionary all the time and had been all my life. It was just that it took that test to solidify things for me. All right, next you need to position yourself when you're building your brand. Identify the qualities or characteristics that make you distinctive from your competitors and/or your colleagues. What have you done to make yourself stand out? This is what you need to ensure that people are aware of. Do not limit your awareness to those above you. Think about lateral colleagues and those below you. Your advocates come from all levels of the organization, not just the people above you. They're the people beside you, they're the people around you, and often they're the people underneath you. And you'd be surprised at sometimes how much someone's admin can influence their opinion. So pay attention to those things. Be mindful and be respectful. You've hit the mark when what you think about yourself and your brand is what others think about you. Think about the corporate culture that you currently exist in. Does it align with you personally and your values, or are you the square peg in the round hole? If you are the square peg in the round hole, are you comfortable swimming upstream? And if you are, that's okay. That's great. It's a great career builder and it's a great strength builder. But if you know you're not comfortable swimming upstream, it might be more advantageous for you to seek an organization that aligns better with your personality and your values. All right, so we're going to talk about managing your brand. And I'm going to talk a little bit about two people who have managed their brand, one well and one not well. Start with Rudy Giuliani. He certainly brought the city of New York to a place where it had not been in a long time. It was a crime-laden city when he started his tenure as mayor, and by the end of his tenure, it was a well-established city where people could once again feel safe and good about living in New York. His career kind of culminated with 9/11, and we saw his strength and his brand come out day to day as he briefed us on the events of 9/11 and what he was going to do and how he was going to handle it. His brand was solid, it was consistent, and throughout the time, it never wavered. Then we can look at Tiger Woods, who's again someone who has had a strong brand initially. He was considered successful, he was considered at the top of his class, but then his personal values and his personal ideals and his personal brand conflicted with what his professional brand was, and his career has never been the same. And although he's somewhat recovered, he still kind of rides the roller coaster that others who are successful do not. So when we talk about managing your brand, once you've developed your brand and you've positioned yourself, you really need to manage it because you want to be a Rudy Giuliani. You do not want to be a Tiger Woods. This is an ongoing effort. Keep in mind that everything you choose to do or that you choose not to do is a reflection of your brand. Think of how you handle the following. Think about phone calls. Think about email. Think about conducting business in a meeting. Do you return calls promptly? Are you efficient and effective? Are you polite? Or are you the person that's texting under the table during the meeting? These are all part of a larger message about your personal brand. In essence, all of these things are the same as an interview. Almost every day that you're at work, you're at an interview with your coworkers. So be on your best behavior if you want to take your career to the next level. What people say about you and what they see about you is how they gauge you and your brand. The more the people believe in your brand, the more it will fluidly self-propagate. If you say you're connected and engaged, but you're texting under the table, you've sent a mixed message because it doesn't really show that you're engaged. And seek honest feedback from others. I know it's hard. Kim talked about it. It's not easy, but it's really, really important because it's going to enable you to evaluate how your brand is doing by getting that honest feedback. All right, solidifying your reputation is sort of the last piece of it, and Peter Montoya sums up reputation succinctly by saying, "What we do defines us." You need to establish yourself as an expert, both internally and externally. As you advance in your career, your expertise and your brand may morph or evolve, and that's all right. All right. So some of the things that define us are really trust. It needs to be part of your brand, and you need to find a way to establish it, because it's how you get your credentials and it's how you get your experience. Reputation is also important because it provides you an avenue with being able to demonstrate your skills as well as your achievement. And perception is the thing we've talked about again and again. It's kind of more the subtle things, the things you may or may not do. It's your interest and it's your personal traits. Establish yourself as an expert and build your reputation. Because in the hard times, it's really your reputation and your values that are going to guide you through your decision-making process. All right, a little bit about maintaining your brand. You always need to be mindful of your brand. To successfully maintain your brand requires constant self-awareness. And that's sometimes a hard thing. Sometimes we're overly critical as women about ourselves, and other times we aren't as self-aware as we need to be. You need to recognize what you do well, and you need to reward and be proud of that. There isn't a guy out there who won't do that. So take it upon yourself to start thinking that way. I'm also going to draw you right now just to social media a little bit because, again, in this day and age, it's a temptation and it's something where you can get caught up in it. Remember that anything you post on social media is hard to remove, erase, and change things that appear on social media. Think about that picture with me in the goofy hat. If that was on social media and I had applied for a job for a promotion to become a vice president at a company and a recruiter saw that photo, is that the face you want at the executive level of your organization? Or do you want that picture on the right where I'm launching artworks? Think about it because it can bite you without you knowing it. Other things that you need to think about to help you manage your brand include how you dress. Are you dressing the way you want to be today? Are you dressing the way you are because it's casual and easy? Or should you be dressing the way you want to be tomorrow so that you're sending a clear and subtle message to people? I want to be a future leader in this organization, so I'm going to dress like the leaders in this organization dress. Is it more important for you to stand out and be individual in your role, or is it more important to fit in? If I had it my way, I'd be wearing Birkenstock sweatpants and a sweatshirt to work every day, but that certainly isn't the image that I need to portray. So think about what you're doing, be conscious and mindful of it. Think about how you conduct yourself. Are you impulsive? Even if you know the answer when you're sitting at a meeting, You need to make sure that you don't blurt out the answer right away all the time, because people will think you're impulsive. You need to demonstrate, if you're going to be a leader, that you're mindful and that you're thoughtful and that you're insightful. So give it a second and then speak your answer or your mind. Also, never be afraid at the table to speak your mind. You've all made it through engineering. That's a huge accomplishment. Canadian engineering schools give you some of the best education out there, and you've certainly accomplished a lot. Use that to be strong and confident when you're sitting around a table. But remember, don't speak just for the sake of speaking. Make sure that what you say is meaningful. Pay attention to your audience. How much time do they have, and how many details do they really need? The vice president or the executive of a company, even though he or she may appear to have all the time in the world and have a lot of leisure time, actually has very limited time. The higher you go, the less time you have, and the more demands and pressures there are on you all the time. Like Kim said, my day probably consists of 7.5 hours of meetings a day, so my time is probably my most important factor at work. So be mindful of what you say, because if you say something small but it's meaningful, you'll have a very strong impact. You also need to listen to the people around you, because they're going to give you subtle clues on how effective your brand is and whether your brand is working or not, and how you might need to improve your brand. Make sure you're thoughtful and intentional around people. Think about who is watching you, even though someone may appear not to be watching you. They could be. Our CEO is famous for that. In the audience or arena that you're in, is it more important to get a chuckle or giggle from the people around you, or to garner respect from someone above you? So really think about the setting and be mindful of what you do. Think about how you interact in meetings, on conference calls, and how you are in your office. Are you Facebooking or tweeting when you should be working? Do you look interested and engaged at meetings, or do you have misplaced priorities? I'm going to talk a little bit about what shapes me. And these are the things I think that have set me apart from others. So to start with, I was the first female president of the Environmental Services Association of Alberta. And I'll call it ESA for short again. And I was the youngest president that they ever had. It's an industry association in Alberta. And to be elected to the board and to be a president of that organization is an accomplishment all in itself, but to be the first female, I think, is pretty outstanding. I was the first female district manager of landfills at Waste Management, which is a Fortune 500 company, and at the time I was there were about 50,000 employees. I was also selected to sit on an Industry Canada technical panel, which evaluated proposals for technical research grants, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and why I personally find that the most exciting thing that's ever happened in my career. And finally, just reaching the executive director level of an organization. I never had management aspirations. I never had many career aspirations early in my career, yet here I am. Obviously, these accomplishments occurred at different phases of my career. If we tie this to our discussion on brand and brand building, you can see that in order to be elected the president of ESA, I needed to have the support and the respect of my colleagues, my customers, and my competitors. My name was out there, whether I recognized it or not. When I look at waste management and the position where I received the district manager position, I was promoted from a landfill engineer, a technical position or guru, to a district manager. I never applied for the job, it was handed to me. And this was really the first affirmation that maybe I had some ability to lead people and that I could be meaningful and important in an organization. It was my internal reputation, what I did at meetings, my meaningful intent and my hard work, and my boss and my boss's boss and the President of Canada, who were my advocates at Waste Management. They were aware of my brand, and they sold my brand up in the organization to me, and that enabled me to achieve that position and accomplishment. In my mind, this was significant because I was one of the few female people. The waste management sector is fraught with men, and I was one of the few females in a traditional, non-traditional male role in the company. As I noted earlier, things in your life will shape your internal and external brand. Travel is my passion, as I said, and here are some things I've witnessed in my life that have definitely contributed to my brand and who I am. When I was on a camel trek in the Sahara Desert, we were fortunate enough to see the rain fall. It was the first time that rain had fallen in that part of the desert in over 15 years. It was the most amazing thing to see the nomads drop to the ground and to praise Allah for the rain that had come. It was also totally astounding to see 12-year-olds running in the rain, sticking out their tongues, catching raindrops and holding their hands out, because can you imagine being 12 and having never seen the rain? For us, it was a real drag because we had to sleep under the stars, and can you imagine what rotten luck it is to have rain on the first time in 15 years in the Sahara Desert when you have to sleep under the stars. But the thing it taught me was to embrace even small victories and to look at insignificance and to help me to find significance in it. In 1998, I was on a safari in Africa, and I was able to see a pride of lions hunt and successfully take down prey. We watched the pride feast over a starry night. What I take out of that is the teamwork that was needed for that kill, the leader, the female that led that kill, and then the whole family feasting together on that carcass. And just, you could feel the energy of that and the togetherness. And what that taught me is even in the animal world, the value of teamwork exists. Often in my early career, I felt defeated. My first turning point and inspiration to realize that even overcoming barriers may be a prerequisite to success. When I was in Montreal, we accidentally ran into Nelson Mandela, who was giving a speech. It was shortly after he had been released from prison. And his energy is something that inspires me to this day. Several years later, I was able to visit Robben Island, where he was kept in captivity and imprisoned, and it really closed the loop for me to understand his inner strength and his drive. I also recently was at a concentration camp, Auschwitz to be specific, and every day I thank myself when the days are hard and I swim upstream or I feel like I'm drowning in my career, because my days are way easier than any day that anybody ever spent in a concentration camp. In many parts of the world, I've watched women tasked with carrying water long distances, 3 miles in each direction, so that they have just enough water for the basic necessities of life. It's not water that we would even consider scum water or slough water here in Canada, and it's made me committed to help them in that cause, and it's really tied me to water and water initiatives. Water is something, sadly, that we take way too much for granted. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about selling your brand and how to gain visibility. Earlier, we talked about the fact that your brand needs to be clear, distinct, and unique. It should be easily understood and compelling. The most important thing you can take away from this is what you do matters. It is significant. Believe in your brand and sell it like you believe in it. Remember that brands are often built unconsciously or subconsciously, so everything you do may be noticed. To gain visibility, you need to find ways to put yourself and your brand out there. If you don't like networking, and trust me, I loathe and despise networking, find a way to make it work. My trick is that I'll volunteer. So if I'm at a conference, I'll volunteer to hand out name badges. That way I get to meet people, and it takes away the awkwardness of introductions. I will work at a bar if there's an opportunity to do that, because again, it's a much easier way to take that awkwardness of introductions away. So think of creative ways. Never ever be afraid to think differently or creatively, because that's sometimes how you break barriers that are there and imposing on you. Don't be afraid to speak up and participate. So many women are, especially if you're the only woman around a table of 50 men that are domineering. But it helps you get out there, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become. It's also a good way to step out of your comfort zone. Find ways to step out of your comfort zone. All leaders do. And be okay within your boundaries and limits. Accept the fact that sometimes you will make mistakes, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about attracting high-profile projects. Maybe you feel that your brand is solid and that you're still stuck. You just can't you get passed by on things that are important to you or opportunities that really appeal to you. I can honestly say that's never ever happened to me, but I believe that that's because I have some innate skills in my personality that have enabled me to avoid it. But I did do a lot of research on this in preparation for this talk, and the thing that came up in spades in the literature is that people who attract high-profile projects always have the following mindsets, and as I went through this list, I realized I have a lot of those mindsets. So I'm actually willing to do anything, and I've done anything. I believe that no task is too menial for me to do if I'm asked to do it, and I do it with the pride and the energy that I would do for a high-profile project as well. I've always had advocates, formal and informally, and they have helped me achieve my goals. So go out and find advocates, because they will help you advance your career and bring things to you that are important to you. Seek out mentors, either formal or informal, or both. Mentors have pointed me in the right direction and given me confidence. Evaluate your work and be honest. Do you need to do more? Should it be more challenging? And if yes, go out and do it. Seeing what needs to be done and doing it. I've surprised my boss time and time again by having something done before he's ever asked for it or even thought that he needed it. Once I rose to higher levels in organizations, I realized how important that skill is. I'm often tasked with finding trouble in our organization and solving the problem. And that's, I think, because I have that sixth sense to find things that are not necessarily quite right, to be able to dive down, find ways to fix them, and then come back up. You need to associate with the right people. So align yourself with the people that have the projects and the respect, or whatever it is that you need to bring what you want to you. If you have an area of interest, network with those people, because they're going to bring those projects and opportunities to you. Also find allies in industry, your industry, as well as your organization. They're the ones who are going to recommend you for panels, positions, and bring unexpected opportunities to you. Also, you need to know the organization that you work in. Learn, listen, and observe. Give the organization what it wants, not what you think it should have. Learn to sense what's crucial, and also when it's crucial to lead, but also when it's time to follow. And if you need to follow, make sure that you follow and embrace and be willing to take the change. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about brand leadership. So we spoke earlier about how brand can help you establish yourself as a leader. Here are some reasons why. It increases your authority and credence. It can place you in a leadership role, both formally and informally. And if you're in a leadership role, it really will establish you as a leader, and it will enhance your prestige through both networks and advocacy. Establishing a brand when you're a leader is critical. The people who follow you want to know what you're about, they need to know what you stand for, and they need to understand your vision. Otherwise, they will not be able to follow it. When you lead people, consistency is critical to your brand. People will follow those who they are familiar with and when they understand their goals. I'll move on to leadership now, as I know some of you are probably transitioning into leadership roles, or maybe you're already there and you're striving to do more and want to do more. Mike Mullane is one of my informal mentors. He's a retired NASA astronaut who now talks about leadership on the speaking circuit. He really helped me understand the behavior of true leaders. In his leadership talks, he states that all leaders have the following attributes, which set them apart from others. They're willing to accept risk. Risk is necessary to learn, to grow, and to advance a business agenda. As engineers, sometimes we're inherently risk-averse, and we need to learn to find that balance. They have unyielding focus and work ethic. You need to put energy in order to get something out. The higher up you go, the more work you'll definitely be tasked with. Few people make it to the very, very top because of the amount of work, the drive, and the energy, and the focus that's needed to stay there. Understand what you want to put into it and accept what you'll get out of it. It's okay, not everybody has to be the CEO of a company. They learn from their mistakes, and they admit to mistakes. If you slide mistakes off to other people, then you're probably going to be perceived as weak in your leadership. The most important thing you can do is admit mistakes, but also to communicate how you're dealing with those failures and how you've learned from them. Think of Steve Jobs, who was fired from Apple. It also means letting people underneath you make safe mistakes. You have to have their back as a good leader, I get that, but you also need to let them make mistakes so that they can grow. They have tenacity. Think of Nelson Mandela. They understand the need for a team and that you cannot possibly do everything yourself. If you try to, it will end in failure. I can't overemphasize the fact that every person is important. And without every cog in the wheel will actually not turn. If you're the leader, recognize those who make up the cogs. This is also where you may need to hand over technical expert reins, if you've been the technical expert for a long time, to a strong successor. Select someone who's strong, who's smart, and who's capable. They'll only make you look better and stronger as a leader. And finally, he says that all leaders know their limits and they respect them. They're not afraid to stretch their boundaries, but they know the boundaries that they're working within. The last one I have on the list doesn't come from Mike Mullane, but it definitely is spread throughout the literature. Leadership is about what you choose to do or not do. If you avoid things like crucial conversations or confrontations or difficult tasks because they're just too uncomfortable or overwhelming, you will never be seen as a leader. Leaders handle the hard things, and the higher up you go, the more difficult things you manage and you deal with, because that's why you've been sussed out for that expertise. So what leaders do is important to understand as well. If you want to take your leadership to the next level, Glenn Lobb, who writes for Forbes, summarizes it well by saying you need to be able to do the following: see opportunity, anticipate the unexpected, unleash your passion, live with entrepreneurial spirit, work with generous purpose. This can be as simple as helping others in the organization, and lead to live a legacy within your own world, not necessarily the global world. I'm going to talk now a little bit about my early journey. I'd like to close by sharing some of my life experience with you. As you'll see, it's actually quite ordinary, but in my own world, I believe it's extraordinary. So let's start with failure. I was forced to take art in home ec in junior high. The reason I bring these up is because you'll see how an advocate helped me and how a held perception could damage brand. So let's start with the art. I love art, but I was the kid that could never color within the lines. Every craft project I ever did was a colossal disaster. And in junior high, I was actually forced to take art. My art teacher was also my math teacher, and she was of the belief that anybody who excelled in math should also be able to excel in art. She was constantly on me in art for not trying hard enough. She felt that I had a crush on the guy that sat in front of me. Honestly, though, I was trying. The image you see is something I actually spent hours drawing. It's a wild rose, in case you're struggling to even figure out what it is, in case it's not clear from the drawing. And she kept me after class, and she made me draw that rose over and over again until I was exasperated to the point of tears. And it was then only that she realized that I really couldn't draw. But her perception hurt my brand. Obviously not my career, because it was way too early for it to influence that. But based on that high caliber drawing that you're looking at, I can bet you guess what happened next when I had to take drafting. I'm old enough that AutoCAD wasn't invented yet, so yes, I took drafting 3 times, and I barely passed it the 4th time. But here I am today, still successful as an engineer. I think the tenacity from the rose actually got me through some of the toughest times in my career. When I was in junior high, I was also forced to take home ec, because that's just what you did. Our vice principal had a heart-to-heart with me, and he actually sat me down in his office and he said to me, home ec was important to me. It would be the most important thing I would ever learn, because that would be how I would pattern my life and make my husband very happy. For the record, I've never been married, and I actually have a tailor that tailors my clothes and manages all of my sewing requirements quite beautifully. IA would have actually helped me better in my engineering career than home ec ever did. In grade 7, I broke 3 sewing machines to the point that they could not be repaired. I was in tears all the time in that classroom, and thank goodness, unbeknownst to me, my mom played the role of advocate. She visited the home ec teacher, she explained my situation, they worked together, and girl power, they came up with an agreement. Behind the scenes, my mom was allowed to help me complete my home ec projects. Thank God. Up until I was almost 30, I had no real career aspiration. All I really wanted to do was be a lifeguard. It was my first taste of career passion, but I was definitely passionate about lifeguarding. I actually enjoyed it more than university, and I actually put more effort into it than university. So when I was in high school, to be completely honest, I graduated and I was still a minor. So my mom actually got to decide a little bit of stuff for me, and she told me I had to go to university. I could pick any faculty, but I was going. I couldn't work at the swimming pool full time. So this is how I worked through it. In an act of rebellion, I chose engineering because there were more boys to girls in terms of ratio. So I thought the odds of getting a husband would be fantastic, and then I could live happily ever after as a lifeguard. Well, I didn't get one of these, the wedding ring, but I did get one of these, the iron ring. In university, I certainly wasn't passionate about chemical engineering. I was passionate about lifeguarding. If I could have put my soul into school like I put it into lifeguarding, I'd probably be doing something totally different today, but that's all right. When I graduated, job prospects were actually really tough because there was a recession, and even the best and brightest in my class did not have jobs, let alone me. Upon another gentle push from my mom, I enrolled in graduate courses in environmental engineering, which is a new area at the U of A. I took wastewater treatment, sewage management, stream analysis, water treatment, and landfill engineering. And by gosh, I found my passion. Sewage, landfills, and hazardous waste became my obsession. Lifeguarding went out the window. All right, so you can see how I ended up where I am today. So now I had the engineering passion, but I really had no opportunity. So here's where networking and word of mouth comes in. My best friend played volleyball with a guy that was an engineer who was starting up a hazardous waste brokerage firm. The industry was fledgling in Alberta at the time, and he had just been awarded a contract for lab packing high-grade lab chemicals. He needed someone with chemistry to help him, but he had no one on his small staff that could do it. My friend volunteered me. She convinced him to hire me, unbeknownst. My interview was bizarre. He just said, "Yep, friend of Shelley's, come on down, take the job." I threw my heart and soul into it because it was my passion, and I did well. At the end of that, he was impressed with me, and he said so. But because the industry was still fledgling, he really didn't have enough to hire me for a job. So it was time for me to step forward and seize opportunity. I offered to continue to work for him, and this was the deal we cut. We struck the agreement that I would accept terrible pay in the months that he couldn't make payroll. I would take no pay, and that I would answer his phones, clean the office, and do any other admin work that he needed, because that was basically what he had a void for. But when the opportunity for lab packing came up again, or other technical opportunities, they were mine to have. I recognized a need for a small company to actually have a safety program. I researched what it would take, and I built a safety program and implemented it from the ground up. He was able to get his core certification, which made him as viable as his larger competitors. In the meantime, while I was building his safety program, his business was picking up, and I slowly became an expert in hazardous waste disposal options and waste classification, which was totally new in Alberta. Every time I answered the phone, I was actually able to give customers technical answers immediately. And I became very well known throughout the province and eventually through Western Canada. We also recognized, my boss and I, the need for a hazardous waste transfer station. So I helped him site it, and I did the technical application for it. Then I recognized, as much as I loved him and I was thankful for everything he did for me, that it was time for me to move on. My reputation enabled me to easily snag a better job at a bigger company. Again, that's that power, subtle power of networking. It was Laidlaw, and I actually thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I was working in Riley at the hazardous waste landfill. Life gets no better. Big company and a hazardous waste landfill, my two passions, what a turn on, wow. I had to work in sales, but that actually helped me build my technical credibility and, again, to establish new networks. While I was there, I was approached, cold called, to work as a landfill engineer at Waste Management's West Edmonton landfill. Life gets no better. I felt I'd died and really gone to heaven this time. A real technical area, a role, credible company, large company with a big paycheck. As I worked my way through that company, I poured my heart and soul into it, and I soon became a landfill operations expert, both within the company and outside of the company. And that's really what enabled me to participate in several internal and external working groups, and how I established myself as a landfill expert. My boss and his boss were excellent internal advocates for me, and my boss was truly my mentor. I was soon promoted into management roles. After more than 10 years in the landfill business, though, I made a personal decision that it was time for me to diversify and explore. I really wanted to do other things, and I really wanted to explore my health and safety passion. So I made a bold career move. I moved from Edmonton to Calgary, which, if you were born and raised in Edmonton, is a very dangerous and risky thing to do. I was going from a high career path where Waste Management had positioned me that at some point I would probably become a vice president in their company, and I decided to step away from operations and move into health and safety because I believed that that was my passion and my future. So I stepped down and took a role as a manager at New Alta, and I've been there ever since. After 2 years, I was promoted to director, and it was in this role that I really began to understand leadership and hone my leadership skills and expertise. And by doing this, I've grown into one of the most influential and respected leaders in our organization. So enough about me. I'm going to talk a little bit about being a subject matter expert. So in your early years, and sometimes when you transition into a new company or a new role or a new industry, it's really important for your brand to establish yourself as a subject matter expert. You need to do that to set yourself apart from others and to really become the best. It's also helpful sometimes to have good role models and mentors to follow. Keep in mind that exceptional talent is more about hard work than it ever is about what you necessarily know or carry in your skill set. All right, so in order to do this, you really need to create a plan. It's okay to think about it in your head and vision it, but you really need to put pen to paper and you need to work hard at it. You need to follow the plan, you need to check the plan, and you need to revise the plan as time goes by. All right, so what made me a subject matter expert early in my career? As discussed in my career summary, I've been singled out for some pretty exciting and unique things. The Industry Canada panel where I got to go to Ottawa and meet my idol, George Shinopoulos, who is considered the sewage treatment guru in North America. It was probably one of the most exciting and important things to me in my career. And every day that I sat around that table with George while we were on that industry panel, I just sat there with this glow on me, thinking, wow, I'm sitting next to George. He invited me to his lab in Berkeley, which was just like, holy cow, nothing is better than that. And I wondered how I was able to get to the table with George. And then I realized again, it was my hard work, my specific knowledge in a niche area, and my internal and external networks that had got me on that table and solidified my brand. And you can see how things start to build. So now I know George, and I have George in my network, which was something I never dreamed I would have had. To close, I want to talk a little bit about self-promotion because it can be confused with promoting your brand. And here's some signs of self-promotion. Be aware of them because you don't want to be doing them. And again, you want to distance yourself from people who are. And if you're managing someone who's a self-promoter, you need to really work with them by challenging them and helping them set their career path straight as well so that they can be successful. So the traits to look for are you isolate yourself from others and you disrupt performance. You've lost your natural self, so you're being someone that you aren't in an effort to be someone else. And this will always result in a lack of executive presence and influence, and it can negatively impact your career. All right, to close, here's what others say my brand represents. High quality work, decision maker, trust and custodian of the company, extensive knowledge in my area of expertise, visionary, but more importantly, real, and a problem solver. It is what I want to be, and it is what people see me as. I don't really feel that I've done anything extraordinary in the scheme of the world, but in my small world, I've accomplished many things, and I hope I have many more to accomplish, and I hope I've inspired you to do the same. Thanks.